I still remember the way the sunlight fell across the kitchen counter that morning, soft, gold, almost forgiving. I was rinsing out my coffee mug when my sister, Clara, came over with a printout in her hand. She was shaking, not crying, not laughing, just shaking. "Lucas," she said quietly, "where did you get this photo?" It was a picture of a teenage boy, dark curls, uncertain smile, standing beside me in front of our local community center. My son, Daniel, or rather, my adopted son. I had posted it online just a few days earlier. We'd been celebrating his acceptance into an art competition. Nothing unusual. Until that moment. Clara sat down, staring at the image as if the world had suddenly cracked open in front of her. Then she whispered, "I know that woman in the background." I frowned. Behind us, blurred by sunlight, was the figure of a woman crossing the street. Mid-step, her face turned just enough to be recognizable if you knew her. But I didn't. Clara looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen since our mother's funeral, eyes that had seen too much. "Lucas, that's Mara." "Mara who?" I asked. "Our mother," she said. For a second, the room went utterly silent. Not even the refrigerator hummed. Because our mother, Mara Costa, had been gone for nearly 20 years. Declared dead after a car accident in the South. There'd been a funeral, an urn, a gravestone. But now my sister was saying she'd just seen her walking behind my adopted son, alive. I wanted to laugh, to deny, to say it was impossible. Yet a tiny pulse of dread began to tap against my ribs. Because deep down, I knew Clara's gift. She never forgot a face. And that day, I learned that the dead sometimes return, not to haunt, but to test the living. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with thunder. It slips quietly into your kitchen and changes everything you thought you knew about love, family, and belonging. Before that morning, life had finally found a gentle rhythm. I was 42, teaching literature at the local high school, and raising Daniel on my own since the adoption 5 years earlier. He wasn't a difficult boy, quiet, observant, the kind who listened more than he spoke. The first time I met him, he was sitting on the steps of the foster home, sketching a bird with a piece of broken pencil. That simple drawing, so precise and patient, made me realize he was someone who noticed the world differently. We built our home slowly, like a story written one page at a time. Mornings with burnt toast and hurried backpacks, evenings spent over homework and bad TV dinners. He called me Pi one night while half asleep, and it nearly broke me. I had wanted to be a father for so long, and Daniel gave that word weight and meaning. My sister Clara lived nearby, coming over on weekends with her 2 daughters. She adored Daniel, always bringing him secondhand books and art supplies. We were a small, steady circle, 3 lives healing from the quiet ache of the past. Our parents had died young, or so we thought, and though that wound never fully closed, we learned to carry it with grace. That's why her words that morning, "That's Mara," hit so hard. It wasn't just shock. It was betrayal of memory itself. I tried to reason with her. "Clara, it's a coincidence. The woman in the picture could be anyone." But she just shook her head. "You don't understand. She had that same silver bracelet. The one she always wore. The one she said she'd never take off." I froze. I remembered it too. A delicate piece of filigree shaped like intertwining vines. A gift from our father on their 20th anniversary. If Clara was right, then everything I knew about my past and Daniel's future was about to unravel. That evening, I couldn't eat. I kept looking at the photo, zooming in on the faint blur of silver on that woman's wrist. It was like staring into a secret that didn't want to be found. Peace, I realized, is never as solid as it seems. It's only the silence before the question that changes everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that silver bracelet glinting from the background of the photo like a whisper I couldn't ignore. Around midnight, I gave up on rest, made a cup of coffee, and stared at Daniel's old sketchbook left on the table. On the first page, he'd once drawn a woman sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons. Her face was gentle, kind, but he'd never said who she was. At breakfast, Clara came back, this time with an old wooden box from our childhood attic. Inside were photos, sepia edges, letters, and a few trinkets that smelled faintly of lavender. She laid one picture next to the printout from my phone. Our mother, Mara, smiling in her garden, wearing that same bracelet. "Lucas, you have to look for her," she said. "If she's alive, we deserve answers." But it wasn't just about us anymore. I looked at Daniel, who was buttering toast, unaware of the storm gathering around him. If our mother was truly alive, why had she disappeared? Why appear now, in his life, of all places? I felt torn between protecting Daniel's calm world and confronting the ghost of my own past. So, I made a decision. I'd test the truth quietly, step by step, without dragging the boy, or my sister, into something that could destroy us. The first rule I gave myself was simple: no assumptions until evidence speaks. The second, never let Daniel suspect anything until I know what I'm dealing with. And the third, if Mara is truly alive, she must have had a reason to stay hidden. I'll find it, but I won't judge it too soon. That afternoon, after school, I walked with Daniel to the park near the community center, the same one where the photo had been taken. He pointed to the bench under the jacaranda tree. "That's where I was sketching that day," he said. "A lady sat there before you came. She was feeding the pigeons. She smiled at me. My heart stumbled. Did she say anything?" He nodded. "Just one thing. She said, 'Your father has kind eyes. Take care of him.'" The words hit me like a riddle carved in kindness. Whoever she was, she knew me, or at least, she wanted me to believe she did. Sometimes the test isn't in finding the truth. It's in being brave enough to follow where it leads. For the next week, I moved through my days like a man half awake. At school, I corrected essays without seeing the words. At home, I cooked, I smiled, I asked Daniel about his drawings, but my mind was always in the park, replaying that sentence over and over. "Your father has kind eyes. Take care of him." I began to retrace everything connected to that moment. The park, the community center, even the route Daniel and I took home that day. I asked a few quiet questions, the kind that sound like small talk but are really fishing lines for truth. The groundskeeper at the park remembered her. "Yes," he said, squinting at the memory. "A woman, older, maybe 60. Always fed the pigeons. Never spoke much. Had that look, like someone who's watching a movie only she can see." I showed him the blurred image on my phone. He nodded slowly. "That's her. She comes on Thursdays. Always the same bench." Thursday. That was tomorrow. That night, I told Clara. She wanted to come, but I shook my head. "Let me go alone first. If it really is her, we need to understand why she's here." The next morning, I pretended it was just another day. I left for work early, but drove straight to the park, sitting on a bench across from the jacaranda tree. The pigeons gathered like they knew a secret. Then, just before 9, she appeared. Her hair was silver now, shorter, but the tilt of her head, that quiet, graceful tilt, belonged to the woman who used to hum while cooking. My mother, Mara. I didn't move. I just watched. She sat down, scattered crumbs, and smiled faintly at the birds. And then, for the briefest moment, she looked up, directly at me. Recognition flashed in her eyes like a candle in the wind. She didn't look startled or afraid. She looked sorry. When I finally stood and began walking toward her, a boy from the center ran up to me, calling my name, some trivial emergency about a forgotten art display. When I turned back, she was gone. Only the pigeons remained, pecking at crumbs shaped like tiny half-moons. That night, when I told Clara, she was silent. Then she opened Daniel's latest drawing, left drying on the table. My breath caught. It was her again. The woman with silver hair on the same park bench, but this time, in her lap, rested a single key. A small, brass key, drawn with such care it looked almost real. The past doesn't knock twice. It leaves clues, quiet and deliberate, for the heart brave enough to listen. I couldn't stop staring at that drawing. The key seemed to shimmer on the paper, as if Daniel had captured light itself. "Did she show you this?" I asked him carefully. He frowned, tilting his head. "No, I just remembered it. I saw it on the ground near her shoes that day. I thought it was pretty." My pulse quickened. "Did you pick it up?" He shook his head. "No, she took it, but she said something strange before she left." He hesitated, eyes flickering with uncertainty. She said, "Keys are only for those who remember what they locked away." That night, after Daniel went to bed, I sat by the kitchen window, the same one where all this had begun. Clara joined me, holding a glass of water. "Do you think she's trying to tell you something?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, "but it feels like she's leading me somewhere." Clara thought for a moment, then said softly, "Lucas, what if Daniel isn't the only reason she's here?" Her words landed like a quiet earthquake. I had been so focused on the shock of seeing our mother alive that I hadn't stopped to ask why Daniel. Of all people, of all parks, of all days, why my son? The next morning, I called the foster agency where I'd adopted Daniel. The woman on the line sounded cautious but kind. When I asked if there were any details about his biological family, even distant relatives, she paused. His file is sealed, she said. But there's an unusual note. It says the birth mother requested the boy be placed with a teacher named Lucas Costa, if possible. My hand went numb around the phone. Who made that request? Her name isn't listed, the woman said. Just the initials, MC. Mara Costa. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. It was as if every wall in my life had shifted, revealing doors I'd never noticed. If my mother had arranged Daniel's adoption, then she'd been alive, aware, and watching us for years. But why? Why hide? Why let me mourn her? And why bring Daniel into my life under such secrecy? Clara's voice trembled when I told her. She didn't vanish, she said. She built a test. And as the thought sank in, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Maybe I wasn't just searching for her. Maybe she was measuring me. Sometimes love doesn't rescue us. It watches from the shadows, waiting to see who we become when we think no one's looking. After that revelation, every ordinary sound in my home felt heavier. The ticking of the clock, Daniel's laughter from his room, even the hum of the refrigerator. They all carried a question. How much of this life had been arranged by a woman I thought was dead? Clara couldn't sit still. We have to find her, Lucas. She's here for a reason. If she wanted to hurt you, she would have done it already. I nodded, but the truth was more tangled. I didn't know if I wanted to find her out of love or anger. For years I had built peace around her absence, and now she was undoing it, quietly, like a seamstress pulling thread from a finished quilt. That night, I went back to the park. The jacaranda tree was almost bare now, its purple blossoms scattered like old confessions across the pavement. On the bench, where she usually sat, lay a single folded note, weighed down by a brass key. It wasn't the key from Daniel's drawing. It was the key from Daniel's drawing. I unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable, curved and deliberate. Rua das Amendoeiras, 27. You'll understand when you're ready. Bring no one. My hands trembled. Rua das Amendoeiras was on the edge of town, an old neighborhood filled with shuttered houses and forgotten gardens. I recognized the address vaguely, a place my mother once mentioned when she and my father were newly married. I told no one, not even Clara. The next morning, I drove there. The house stood behind a rusted gate, white paint peeling, jasmine crawling up the walls. The front door was locked, but the key fit perfectly. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory. There were photos on the mantel, some of our family, others of people I didn't know. And in the center of the living room sat an easel with a half-finished painting. It was Daniel. The brushstrokes were unmistakable, her style. She'd painted him from memory, down to the faint scar on his chin. My throat tightened. There were canvases stacked in the corner, portraits of children, faces full of sorrow and hope. On one frame, written on the back in faded ink, were the words, "They deserved love, not pity." And then I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway. I turned. She was there, standing in the doorway, older, frilier, but unmistakably her. "Hello, Lucas," she said, her voice trembling yet steady. "You found me." I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She smiled sadly. "I wasn't hiding from you. I was hiding for you." Sometimes the hardest truth isn't that we were abandoned. It's realizing the people we lost may have been protecting us all along. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The house felt suspended between decades, between the mother I remembered and the stranger standing before me. Her hair had turned the color of ash, her hands thin, the bracelet still circling her wrist like a memory refusing to let go. "May," I whispered. The word felt fragile, like porcelain. She smiled faintly. "You haven't called me that in 20 years. Because you've been dead," I said, my voice cracking. "We buried you. We cried for you." I stopped myself. The anger surprised me. I thought it had died long ago, buried under layers of quiet forgiveness. She sighed, leaning on the wall for support. "I know what I've done, but I had no choice, Lucas. No choice." I took a step closer. "You let us mourn you. You let Clara grow up believing she was an orphan. And you watched me from the shadows while I raised a boy you placed in my arms without telling me who he was." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. "I did it to protect him. And you." The room went utterly still. "Protect us from what?" She reached for a drawer and pulled out an envelope, worn and yellowed. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles about a man arrested years ago for trafficking children under the guise of a charitable foundation. The man's name, Eduardo Ramos, my father. My stomach turned to stone. "That's impossible," I said. He was more complicated than you ever knew," she said gently. "When I found out, I went to the police. But the case was dangerous. I was the key witness. They offered to protect me, but not the family. They told me if I stayed, everyone I loved could be used against me. So I disappeared. I couldn't breathe. All those years, we thought she'd died in a crash. She'd been hidden under another name, living a shadow's life." "And Daniel?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She hesitated. "His mother was one of the women I helped, one of the victims. She died young. Before she passed, she begged me to make sure her boy found a good father. I knew you had love in you, Lucas. Real love. I asked the agency to find you. My knees nearly gave out. Everything. The photo, the park, the key. All of it was her way of revealing the truth safely, slowly, once she believed the danger had passed. You should have told me," I whispered. She nodded. "I know, but I needed to be sure you'd built a life not from revenge, but from kindness. That's what I couldn't risk breaking." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, tears burning, the old anger dissolving into something harder to name, a mix of awe and grief and reluctant forgiveness. Then I felt a presence at the door. Daniel stood there, clutching his sketchbook. He'd followed me. His eyes went from her to me, searching. "Dad?" he said softly. "Is she the woman from the park?" Mara smiled through tears. "Yes, dear. And you were the reason I came back." Some confrontations don't end with shouting or blame. They end with silence, the kind that holds both the wound and the healing in the same breath. The days that followed felt like walking through a life I had to learn again. The story I'd told myself for 2 decades, about loss, about family, about who I was, had cracked open like old paint, revealing something raw but honest underneath. Mara stayed hidden still, at first. Clara and I agreed to keep her return secret until we could decide what to do next. But Daniel wanted to see her again. "She feels familiar," he said one afternoon, sitting beside me on the porch steps. "Like I've known her in a dream." I nodded. Maybe some people leave pieces of themselves with us, even before we meet them. So I took him to the park, where the jacaranda tree was now blooming again, defiant against the wind. Mara was already there, feeding the pigeons as if time had bent backward. When Daniel saw her, he didn't hesitate. He just walked up and sat beside her. They didn't speak at first. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw. She watched him, eyes soft, hands trembling. After a while, she took off her silver bracelet, that same delicate chain that had begun this entire story, and placed it on the bench between them. "This belongs with you now," she told him. "Your mother once wore it. She gave it to me when she knew her time was ending. Said it should go to you when you were ready." Daniel looked up, confused. "My mother?" Mara nodded. "She was brave, and she loved you more than you'll ever know." He hesitated, then picked up the bracelet, running his fingers over its pattern. "It looks like vines," he said. "Because love," Mara whispered, "always finds a way to grow back." When we walked home later, Daniel was quiet but peaceful. That night, he placed the bracelet on his nightstand beside a small drawing, the 3 of us sitting on the park bench under the jacaranda tree. Clara visited Mara a week later. Their reunion was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no questions. Just 2 women holding each other after too many years apart. When Clara left, she told me, "She's tired, Lucas. But she's finally free." Mara passed away 3 months later. A gentle passing, in her sleep, in that old house on Rua das Amendoeiras. She left behind letters for both of us. Mine began simply, "My son, I wanted you to live without bitterness. To build your family not from blood, but from choice. You did that. You passed the test I never dared to take." At her funeral, a small, private ceremony, Daniel wore the bracelet around his wrist. As we laid her to rest beside our father, a gust of wind shook the trees, and purple petals from a nearby jacaranda drifted over her grave. Later that day, we stopped by the park. The bench was empty, but a few pigeons waited as if expecting her. Daniel sat down and began to draw again. When he finished, he smiled and handed me the sketch. It was of the park, but this time, there were no people. Only the bench, the tree, and sunlight breaking through the branches. "She's still here," he said. And I believed him. Because love, once planted, never really dies. It just changes form, waiting quietly, patiently, for us to notice it again. Kindness, I learned, is not about what we owe the past. It's about what we choose to give the future, even when no one is watching. It's been 2 years since the day under the jacaranda tree, and yet sometimes I still catch a glimmer of silver when the sun hits Daniel's wrist just right. The bracelet has become part of him, not a relic of loss, but a quiet reminder of where love once hid and where it finally decided to return. Life feels simpler now, though the truth behind it all still hums beneath the surface. I still teach at the same school, still drink my coffee too strong, and still watch Daniel sketch by the window in the mornings. But there's a calmness in me I never knew before, the peace that comes after understanding rather than forgetting. Clara says she often dreams of our mother. In her dreams, Mara is sitting on that same park bench, feeding pigeons. She never speaks, but she always leaves something behind: a folded letter, a key, a drawing. Symbols of connection, of unfinished love that continues its quiet work even after we're gone. Sometimes I visit the house on Rua das Amendoeiras. It's empty now, but the jasmine still climbs the walls as if guarding a secret. Inside, the smell of paint lingers. I kept one of her unfinished canvases, the portrait of Daniel. It hangs in our living room. Every guest who visits asks who painted it, and I just smile and say, someone who understood love better than most. Daniel is 17 now. Last month, he was accepted into an art institute in Lisbon. Before he left, he hugged me and said, "Dad, I'll find a way to paint her story one day." I told him she'd like that, not because she needed to be remembered, but because she wanted her story to teach something. That compassion can grow even in the shadows. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I still go to the park alone. The pigeons gather as if they recognize me. I sit there and think about how much was tested: truth, patience, forgiveness, and how, somehow, all of it found its way back to kindness. I used to think family was about bloodlines and last names. But now I know it's about the people who choose to stay, who choose to care, who choose to keep showing up even when the world tells them to disappear. So if you're listening to this, maybe take a moment to call someone you've drifted from, or forgive someone who once vanished. Life is too brief to carry silence when love is waiting to be spoken. Because sometimes, all it takes is one photograph, one park bench, one act of grace, to bring the dead back to life and the living back to love. In the end, kindness is the legacy that outlives us all.